Lynn, our first conversation was very interesting because I could have gone on and on about cybersecurity because it really is something that municipal leaders continue to learn about. And I can tell you that learning about the threat actors was one of the things that also was intriguing, because I do know people's ego wants to say, I got into the federal government, I got into New York, Atlanta, Baltimore, and that ego has challenged them to come after local governments, because we have not been as prepared and had a plan. And you talked about that in our first episode. But I want to talk about the fact that maybe there is a need to move to the cloud and create virtual solutions. And I want to understand, why do you think that's important? Why do you think there's a need to move to the cloud and create virtual solutions?
I think that's a great question, Clarence, and I think it dovetails and segues on the security side that we just talked about. I also think there's a whole COVID aspect to it as well, and so there's a lot to unpack there. And I'll try my best to sort of summarize some of my thoughts on it. Really generally about the benefits of moving to the cloud, and to me, as I look at Tyler and Tyler's long-term strategy, and which is really partnering with our local government clients. I mean, we want to be your partner for the next, not just the next year, but for the next 10 years, 20 years, 50 years. And so as I think about the long-term roadmap for Tyler, I'm thinking about the long-term benefit for our clients. And I just see so many benefits, which is really why Tyler has shifted its long-term strategy from what was historically we used to call a more cloud agnostic approach to really now a more cloud preferred, cloud first approach. So, at the highest level, to me, the benefits of operating the cloud for local government, it includes things like, the systems itself that run the clouds. They create better connections between departments and across jurisdictions and with citizens. Some stuff we'll talk about a little bit later with connected communities that really doesn't quite exist today. I think another aspect is really security. We just talked a lot about cybersecurity, but the cloud really provides improved security. And as I mentioned earlier, the reality is that cloud providers, they can invest so much more in their infrastructure and their security in ways that, individual organizations simply can't. And if you think about it, while a cyber attack is something nobody really wants and can afford, it would be really crippling for an AWS or an Azure to have something like that happen. So that they are spending multiples upon multiples of resources on their security. Another thing that I think's a benefit for local government is really, as technology evolves and you get more and more native cloud offerings, it really provides the opportunity for people like Tyler to provide more continuous improvement and continuous deployment to those critical efficient systems. This allows us, faster upgrades, more stable upgrades with very minimal disruption. As we move out into the cloud and we move down this road, gone will be those days of where you're trying to implement some massive upgrade every few years that almost seems to break as many things as it fixes. And, this is a very crude example, but I liken it to, your iPhone every day. I wake up, I've got 5 new updates, and I push update, it's done, and I just move on. That's the world of continuous improvement, continuous deployment. A little more complicated in some of the systems that we deploy, but the concept's the same. I think another thing for the cloud is it really improves and brings you more diverse disaster recovery. So, cloud providers, they really have multiple failover sites. They call them, availability zones that really ensure that your operation is going to be up and running no matter what disruption comes your way. Cybersecurity, they've got the protection, but if you've got a natural disaster, power outages, they've got disaster zones all around the country, multiple hubs in each time zone, and they're going to be there for you. I think from a budgeting standpoint, as you start to move away from these large internal IT infrastructures, along with the need to maintain and periodically replace those infrastructures, that makes budgeting a little more predictable, and it eliminates the need to plan for these large capital infrastructure projects. So again, these cloud providers, they can invest in infrastructures at levels that other organizations can't, whether it's security, whether it's the microservices that they're offering, whether it's all these availability zones. This is their business. They're the experts here.
Yeah.
And I think by not trying to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, local governments can then invest their resources and time in other areas that really, can help make their communities better.
So, I mean, to be honest, in reality, a lot of local governments weren't prepared for the transition. I mean, can you share the value of some online solutions for local governments and some examples of how maybe some cities have used these tools to be successful in transitioning to the
Yeah.
cloud?
Yeah. So, there's sort of two different things there you're talking about, Clarence. So it's sort of our core applications that are up and running in the cloud. But as we talk about things like, let's talk about COVID for a minute. I mentioned COVID has an impact and shows you why you should really, potentially move to more mobility and move to the cloud. And I see some of the things that are coming out with COVID and some of the responses. I think COVID's an interesting thing. I think there were certain industries that were already on a certain path, and COVID sort of accelerated that path. It's really disrupted some industries, and a great example of that would be what I tell people is the brick and mortar retail stores, right? So pre-COVID, brick and mortar retail, it was already going down a certain path. When you look at the models that were coming out by people like Amazon and stuff, I mean, they were putting malls out of business, Pier 1's going out of business. These stores were already going in decline. And what happened with COVID is it sort of accelerated that. When I look at the business of local government, I actually see something somewhat similar. And I continue to see the shift to new online mobile public service delivery to citizens. And I think that's a change that's here to stay. And when I think about the future of local government, I believe that, COVID has sort of accelerated this path to more mobility, more public service being online and different sort of delivery. And one reason I say that really is, we didn't get to talk. I've got kids. I assume you probably have kids, but when I think about the younger generation, and I think about how kids today, whether they're my 20-something-year-olds or my or teenagers, and you think about how they use technology and how they think about technology, and I think their expectations as citizens will be for government to work really the same way the rest of their world works. And right now, it doesn't really work that way. And I think it's that expectation that's going to keep changing the way local government operates. So I think that's a big piece of the mindset of what's going on right now.
I think I agree with you, and what I'm trying to get over to our members is the economic benefit, if you will, for transitioning to the clouds and making sure that the residents are getting access to the services a little bit more efficiently and effectively, and as well create more transparency. Are you looking at that, or have you guys looked at that from a COVID perspective, as well as supporting the businesses in the community?
Oh, absolutely. So, some of the things that's been really rewarding for me at Tyler over the last 7-8 months that COVID has hit is, one, we've accelerated some of our own internal development initiatives, but we've also partnered with some of our clients to really find some solutions to help them with some specific issues related to COVID in their communities. We've done things like added COVID categories and information to existing 311 systems. We've done things like used our school bus transportation software, to facilitate student meal delivery. We've leveraged data to sort of, inform action and continuously communicate with the public. We've enhanced and developed what we call virtual courts, where now people can do court processes virtually without having to come in person. We've seen things like, for example, in Buffalo, New York, the leaders there created this centralized hub for the employees and the public to access key COVID-19 information in their community. A place like Richmond, Virginia, they added more than 700 users to its citizen self-service portal in just 2 weeks during April for online permitting and applications and payments. The city of LA used data to fuel what we call a food access map to serve increased need in that community. So we've seen a lot of tools that have actually been specifically targeted for COVID and COVID relief and COVID areas in these communities.
No, I think that's very helpful, especially during COVID-19, because none of us, whether it was Tyler or National League of Cities or the cities that you named, was ready for this time. But yet, being able to transition to the cloud and use virtual solutions to provide services and to respond to the needs of residents continually has been a benefit of being prepared and having a plan that you talked about earlier.
Absolutely. And I think as you start thinking about it, when you get to the other side of this and you start thinking about economic recovery and supporting businesses in recovery, there's a lot of things we're doing there that are part of our cloud technologies that will be helpful for these local governments as we get to the other side of that. And, I think one of the things that's most important to me when you think about local government and the future of local government, it's really about data and what data can do. And we're going to talk about a little this more, I think, in the next segment. But there's so much data out there and so many disparate systems that just simply is untapped. And the ability for solutions that are based in the cloud to come in and tap that data and put it in the dashboards in the meaningful ways that leaders can really use it and make meaningful decisions is something that's going to be very powerful going forward. And let me give you two quick examples of that. So at Tyler, we've introduced a couple of new solutions, which we call Recovery Insights. Now these Recovery Insights, what it does is it takes our Socrata, which you're very familiar with, our data and insights platform, and this is a cloud native platform built totally within AWS, and it overlays two of our existing leading products. One is our Munis ERP solution, and the other is our Civic Services EnerGov permitting licensing solution. So one of these products we call Executive Insights. This is the one that's built on top of Munis, and what it does is Socrata sits on top of this system and pulls out all this information from all these different systems that are connected to the ERP financial area of the local government, and puts it up in this dashboard so that the leaders can really understand what's going on in their community. And it's things like, their budgets, their cash balances, HR metrics, payroll versus overtime, where's their revenue versus budget, where's their property tax revenue versus budget, things that you just can't easily access today because you have to go into all these different systems to pull that information. Well, we've got a solution now that does that. Another thing when you talk about economic recovery is we've developed this thing called Community Development Insights. And this is built on top of our Civic Services. Same thing, our Socrata platform, built in the cloud, AWS. And really what that does is it provides real-time data on things like, okay, the number of permits being issued, how many permit applications are there, what are the number of inspections going on, where are those inspections, what's the value of those permitted inspections. And what that does is it starts giving these leaders real-time snapshot and picture of the economic health and recovery that's going on that you'll start seeing as we come back out of COVID.
No, I think, and I must say that that's what we're focused on at the National League of Cities, trying to give solutions as we transition through COVID. But I will agree with you that we also have to be prepared to transition and accelerate that transition to the cloud and use those virtual solutions to be able to help our members. So what are you tending to see as the biggest barrier to local governments to this transition? Is it lack of knowledge? Is it the fact that, again, we have so many priorities and sometimes we don't see the transition to the cloud as number 8 in our priorities? What do you see as the biggest barrier?
I think it's funny. I think historically it almost used to be a mindset, which is, these are our systems, this is our data, and we want to make sure we maintain control over it. And if you look back 10 years ago, the number, we've been doing a cloud solution, a Tyler Cloud, going back probably about 18 years now. If you go back, 5 years ago, 8 years from now, 8 years ago, the number of systems that we sold that were SaaS or cloud-based systems was markedly lower than what they are today. And what we have seen over the last several years is that more and more clients are starting to move, and the shift is moving to the cloud. I'd say probably 5 years ago, we were probably selling 20 to 25% of our new solutions were in the cloud. Today, that number is probably more like 55%. So the momentum is getting there. And I think you've also got, you've got a lot of local governments who've invested a lot in their current IT infrastructure. Some of them still have some older systems and some systems that were specifically built for that structure. And there's just not that urgency yet, until that system sort of starts to break down and they start to see wear and tear. That will create the sense of urgency to start to think elsewhere. But some of them do have a capital investment that they need to realize still.
Well, Lynn, I do appreciate that you're talking to our members about how the benefits really of transitioning to the cloud. The fact that this is going to create more efficiency and more connectivity, if you will, to our businesses and helping them during this COVID-19 time, because a lot of the dollars in the CARES Act, local governments are actually using to help small businesses to survive. And I also think that Zoom bombing has brought a public awareness because I think local governments are using the virtual tools to transact business and to govern their communities. So this is an important topic, and we appreciate you sharing your knowledge and expertise on how we accelerate to the cloud and use virtual solutions.
No, absolutely. I'm happy to do so. And as we said, the world is changing, and I think we all need to be prepared for it.
Well, thank you. Look forward to talking to you again.
Thanks, Clarence.